Hello, my name is Stacia McCants. I am doing an oral presentation on the Texas City disaster of 1947 by Hugh W. Stevens. The tragedy occurred on April 16, 1947, early in the morning. An explosion of ammonium nitrate fertilizer caused two Liberty ships docked at the Texas City docks to disintegrate into flames, and the outcome would lead to an implementation of various policies and regulation. The explosion began as a small fire in the hold of the Grand Camp, but the blaze quickly spread, destroying the ship and causing wreckage within a radius of 2,000 feet. Workers smelled smoke and soon seen flames. Crew members tried to put out the small fire with water and even two fire extinguishers. The fire continued to grow. A crew member lowered a water hose to find the water was not turned on. As the growing as the fire was growing, crew members were ordered to leave the hold. Those on the ship were ignorant to the hazardous nature of the fertilizer in the presence of open flames. The captain was more focused on the cargo than the growing fire. He requested that the fire be extinguished by closing out the hatches and filling the hold with steam to attempt to smother out the fire. As the remaining crew members were removing supplies from another hold, the flames and heat grew, forcing them off the ship. Firefighters trying their best to put out the flames when the hatches blew and a massive explosion erupted. The blaze left onlookers confused and not knowing what to do next. They were unaware another explosion was impending on the high flyer that would cause a further damage 16 hours later. Again, another preventable disaster if ship officials would have responded when workers reported a fire on board several hours before the first explosion. So the impact from the event was very tragic for such a small town. The Red Cross and Texas Department of Public Safety counted nearly 600 lives were lost and thousands were injured over the two-day ordeal. Some individuals were classified as believed missing due to no trace of the remains ever being recovered. Although not all of those impacted by the explosion were residents of Texas City, the total was equivalent to 25% of the town's estimated population. There was immense property damage, over nearly $1 million worth at the time. That estimate does not include 1.5 million barrels of petroleum products destroyed in the fire, which at the time was valued at $500 million. The refinery infrastructure and pipelines included 50 oil storage tanks that were also destroyed or damaged. Tragically, homes were condemned and many were displaced, and the recovery process would be brutal for the many affected by the disaster physically and mentally. The book talks about several precursors that led to the event. The first was the existence of chemical and oil refining facilities, as well as a large amount of highly explosive and combustible goods kept close to the coastline. Secondly, a portion of the town's residential sector was located close to the docks and the petrochemical industries. Thirdly, a general lack of concern about the potential risk of the hazardous material going through the port was supported by officials and the general public. Lastly, the approach to the fires was significantly decentralized, and there was no plan for a well-coordinated response in the event of a disaster. Following the tragedy, government and society had to shift their focus to rebuilding what was left of the community. Homes and businesses had to repair and reconstruct, and that happened within months following the fires. New housing was also built to accommodate the increasing population. And although cargo operations never resumed at the port, the restoration and expansion of the petrochemical companies sparked economic growth. Many officials set out to implement various standards and newfound regulations to mitigate the chances of a similar preventable disaster occurring in the future. Dr. Quinn took lead on creating plans for an emergency disaster unit that helped with getting emergency supplies, providing treatment, and delegating transportation for victims. Undertaker submitted a plan that was approved by government that was designed to designate a federal director in the area where the disaster occurred, and they were to assume lead on handling the dead when local undertakers were not available to complete the job. Firefighting capabilities were also improved as well. In 1948, a firefighting cooperative called Industrial Mutual Aid Systems was created to identify resources and establish procedures when helping members whose resources were exhausted in an emergency, and incorporating periodic testing through plans through exercises. Refineries improved their facilities by adding new staff and upgrading training and equipment. The Civil Protection Act of 1951 was passed in Texas legislature, and the act placed importance on a more consistent policy towards management of disasters, and specific individuals were given roles when responding. So I couldn't find any weaknesses, so I capitalized on the strengths here. The book was really a really great read, and it was a lot of detail provided. I couldn't capture everything in this short of a presentation. There were multiple aspects of the disaster that was addressed, and also the downfalls and successes and everything in between. It was a great depiction between how government was involved and how society was also involved. And they also included a newspaper article part about like what it was, and it was assessing what was occurring at the time. It spoke about the lawsuits and also the sanitation concerns at the time, which I found was very interesting. And then I also included some pictures just to show dedication and remembrance of the tragedy. Well, thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to read you all's commentary. Have a great night or day, whatever time you guys are watching this.